17th of October 2006. Mallory. There was something wrong, something different. No check at the door, no lock to it. Owen knocked on it, then pushed it open with the palm of his hand. He had scorned Gwen's advice of bringing her flowers. No, you gave her enough last time, didn't you? She had called derisively after him, down the passage. Ha ha, Owen had replied, sarcastically. But after the Birmingham turning, and out into the suburbs, he had passed a lay-by selling bouquets, and bought one. He was sorry. He had breached her privacy. But then, it was a good method, an efficacious one. Owen would stand by that. He had learned his profession both in an exceptional university and a bad apprenticeship. He didn't even knew doctors like John Flowers existed outside Victorian novels. When Owen had met the man, in the East End of London, one rainy Tuesday afternoon, in a pub, of course, Dr. Flowers had taken him on his rounds, teaching him any number of tricks, unethical tricks. Tricks that worked. There were times to use them, Flowers had told Owen, and he would know them. But, the bouquet was superfluous now, as Owen Harper crept into Torchwood 4 completely unopposed. He stood in the hallway for a minute, peering to the left into the large living room. Mallory? Was something wrong? Had she taken a turn for the worse? Katie, his fiancée, had been having unexplained memory losses for several months, and the doctors had diagnosed a brain tumor. As it was, it had been an alien parasite. It was the first thing Owen had checked, the first time, when they had all come to Torchwood 4. He had not been interested in her body then. Hell, he wasn't interested in it now. But he was concerned that Mallory had left the door unguarded. In the living room, every possible surface was covered in flowers, in vases, in jars, even some in the fish tank. His would never be noticed amongst all of these, obviously coming from Archie McLeish of Torchwood. Too good, Owen told himself, and stuffed the tulip and lily bouquet into a vase which seemed to contain many of the same. As he made to leave, tinkling laughter came from the direction of the garden, echoed by a deep rumble of laughter. Owen turned to see Mallory, eyes bright, humor at her lips, stepping through the door, shoeless, Archie behind her. When she saw Owen, her face fell, and she stood at the door like a lost soul. Behind her, the lumpen mass of a man in his 60s stood beside her, also barefoot, old trousers rolled up to the knee. "Dr. Harper!" Mallory exclaimed. Then, with a brief glance to Archie, she added, "Tea." It wasn't a question. She was going to get tea for them all. Owen looked to the flowers, then back to McLeish. "Owen Harper," he told the man, sighing his own name. "Torchwood 3. I have come to—" He broke off as Archie McLeish narrowed his eyes. "I ken well who ye are," he told Owen, sharply. "Ye're man, Welsh ... Jones." He used Tarcum Turas, regular. He glanced around the living room, then stuck two meaty fists where his hips might have been. "Ye've come to make her headaches better." "Well, I ken." McLeish was interrupted himself by Mallory flitting back in and asking whether they wanted biscuits. Owen held up a hand. "None for me," he told her, then looked to Archie. "Dirty magazines, dirty expression," he thought, as he watched the man look Mallory up and down. What was it Ianto told them? They had an engagement, of sorts. The thought turned his stomach. "Look, I'm sorry I walked in," he told Mallory, following her into the kitchen. The cups were of the kind now fashionable in every tea shop in the country, retro heritage, pink flowers and gilt edges. Owen betted that she had had them from new. "None of your security systems stopped me." "You left everything open." "It's fine," said Mallory, brightly. "You passed the security. Archie and I redesigned it so the house really does look deserted." "If ye hadn't passed it," put in McLeish, who had followed him into the kitchen and was now hovering at the door, "ye'd not be standing here, eh?" "Well, thank you, Mr. McLeish," Owen said, with affected formality. The man threw back his head and laughed, his chins wobbling with his mirth. "No, Archie," he corrected Owen, "ye can call me Archie. "And I wanna thank ye for treating the girl," he added. And in Owen Harper's mind the odious man had said, "My girl." Perhaps she was. Perhaps their interests, their clandestine work was enough to put them together. He brought Mallory flowers. What would he expect her to do in return? Tea made, and Mallory picked up the tray, looking between Owen and Archie towards the living room. I can take that, Owen told her, swiftly grabbing the tray and turning. He stared at Archie, who eventually yielded. Ah, the Southern doctor can manage a tray and tea, Archie told Mallory. But, could he have managed the security system? Mallory smiled as she stepped past Owen, Archie McLeish escorting her back into the living room, hand at her lower back. An instinct in Owen Harper made him want to smash the tea tray off the hideous man's head. He clenched his mouth closed and followed Mallory in. So, how did you manage it? The security? He asked Mallory, placing the tray onto the table between the two settees. She touched the left side of her head. Clearly suffering, he noted as she moved aside two vases of roses. How is it different? At the hub Osarian brain tissue, Archie interrupted. My girl here knows thousands of languages. The Osarians had psychic ability, but Owen turned to Mallory. Isn't the tissue pliable, like plasticine? Mallory nodded, pausing in the act of pouring the tea. We use something similar at the hub. Indolorian, not Osarian. It's rare, isn't it? He added. Owen's a doctor. Mallory nodded to Archie, not seeming to notice the tension in the air, tension that Owen silently acknowledged he was causing. He knows about brains. So, perhaps when I've checked you over, you could show me, one expert to another. He glanced at Archie, who was already draining his cup, noting the man's urge. TP cut Owen down. You can't do it without Mallory knowing how much of a twat you really are, he thought to himself, with satisfaction. You think the Stitchy-Mup would understand, Mallory, darling? Archie McLeish asked of Mallory. She nodded. I would trust Owen with my life. I do trust Owen with my life, she added, giving Owen a long, grateful smile. Aye, on the say-so of Captain Jack, Archie replied, and he sounded as if he approved. Jack was the one who saved me from oblivion. I've always trusted him. And WTH, that admission of weakness, Owen pounced, like a cat having been told by a mouse that it can't run very fast. I suppose it's a lot to do up in Scotland, with the Kelpies and the water horses and the Loch Ness monster. Archie turned to Owen, and broke out into a big grin. Aye, he admitted. Someone has to keep them in line. The rift breaks down just beyond Hadrian's Wall. Ye ken, so all of Scotland is alive with rift activity, he added. That would explain a lot, thought Owen, miffed at his jibe having fallen flat. Oh yeah? He asked aloud, taking a big glug of tea. I never knew that. Just you for the whole of Scotland. Aye, Archie agreed, and there seemed to be a touch of sadness in his voice. Aye, just me now. He glanced to Mallory. Me and your old dad, eh? He added wistfully. We had sometimes. I am glad it was you, Mallory said, as Archie poured some more tea, and then shoved two fig rolls into his mouth at once. I programmed it to recognize you, Jack and Archie. She trailed off. Something was on her mind. Something was always on her mind, Owen reasoned. But she dipped her head. A big, meaty hand reached to her shoulder. She reached up and rested hers on his. Then, a wave of pain caused her to withdraw it and place it to her own. We did it, Mallory told Archie, looking up to him. With the Osarian tissue. You did it, my beauty, he told Mallory. You stabilized the rift. For now, she said softly, almost as if she didn't believe it herself. And you do that too? Stabilize the rift. Owen's question was out of his mouth before he could stop it. Mallory turned to him and smiled. I go behind it, I can control it, and it cannot control me. Really? His thoughts turned to Jack. He would have known that. Didn't their leader think it would be important to share that nugget of information with him? It was such a strange place, if it was a place at all, was the rift. If Mallory went behind into it, to retrieve her weird things and advanced technology, then it could well be causing her terrible head pains. Let me look at your head, Owen said to Mallory, lowering his own head, and his voice. I want to see if you have improved. She got to her feet quickly, and made her way to the door. Give me a minute, Mallory told him, I have got to do something first. I'll call you. Don't take your clothes off, for heaven's sake, Owen told her, silently. And then, As the door between the living room and the hall swung closed and the back of Mallory disappeared, he realized that he hadn't derided her dress sense during her visit. Still in boots, she was wearing a flowery dress that came past them, like a young girl playing dress-up, her hair combed long in two partings. Even thinking about it, Owen could think of nothing to criticize. Where was Gwen when he needed her for a well-positioned barb? Unit is after her, Archie told Owen, bluntly, as Torchwood 3's doctor lingered by the door. She knows getting married means they will be off her back. Why? Owen asked defensively. We're not in the 50s, McLeish, he added. But from the look on the man's face, there was clearly something more. You really don't know anything much, do you? Archie drawled in a voice that made Owen more angry because he had not taken the bait. Torchwood 1 and Unit ... if they get hold of her ... they'll do what they were gonna do, Ren. Imprison her again. Isn't that why she married Roderick Collier? Owen added, belligerently. Archie McLeish turned his eyes sadly to Owen. Dissection. That would have been my darling Ren's fate. Roddy got her out and nature took its course. A voice called through from the hall. It was Mallory. Owen took up his medical bag, as he mulled the word. Dissection? Were they as ruthless as all that? And another voice, in his own mind now, added, don't be so stupid, Owen Harper. Of course they are. Look what happened that caused the Cyberman attack. She could still work, Owen insisted. She's needed. She is indispensable, Dr. Harper, growled Tartan Archie. Then one wonders why you would wish to take her away from Torchwood, Mr. McLeish. Owen wished to rage as Archie stepped past him. Mallory, I'm going to go now, he called through to her. Still clothed as she had been when she left, Mallory Collier appeared at the door. I'll call, Archie McLeish told her. There are some things my end to do. It was disgusting watching him grope at Mallory as he kissed her on cheek. Owen's part, he wanted to throw Archie McLeish's hands from her and pound him into the ground. 5 minutes later and Owen was kneeling beside Mallory, who was lying on her bed. He pressed his fingertips lightly over her skull as he watched her face for signs of pain. It still hurts, Mallory told him, but it's not badly as before. She moved her head to look at Owen. He moved his hands away, patiently. Do you have the injection? She asked, her eyes searching Owen's face now. Yes, I have more, he told her. She sat up and looked at Owen, seriously. It's not as if I have not applied the technique you demonstrated, she added. Oh? Owen looked at her, amazed. And ... did it work? Mallory nodded her head. It has a little. You were right, P. It is a good stress reliever. I've modified it a little. Archie told me he would help me with the technique. I bet he did, Owen thought. Would you like me to show you? Mallory asked, brightly. No, no. Owen put up his hand defensively, wondering what Jack would make of that when he got to hear about it, which he would undoubtedly would. I've made some more serum. This will do much better. He reached for his bag, and for the file he had got out of the cold store that morning. And, if you could minimize the time you spend within the rift. 88,888,888 August 2018. I told you not to call unless it was an emergency. Captain Jack Harkness's voice sounded far away. It also sounded cross, as if Gwen Williams had just interrupted him doing something important, which, she figured, she might have. Really, Jack? On a payphone? Do you know how hard it is to find one in 2018? Even being connected by fiber optic cables, Gwen could feel her question being ignored. How long is he staying for? She put in, determined to get to the point of the call. Why, she was standing in Split in the early hours of the morning, having pounded the streets looking for a phone box that hadn't already been converted into a book library, cash point or defibrillator. None of those would exist in Split, not unvandalized, at any rate. As long as I need him to, came back Jack's vague answer. Only, school, Gwen prompted. Can't he stay with you? Jack Harkness asked her, plaintively. No, he can't, Jack. I have a business to run. What about ... whoever is Torchwood now? There is no Torchwood, as you very well know, Victory. Gwen had guessed Jack had alluded, but he had never properly told Gwen until that moment. Gwen? Yeah? I'll sort out school, He's a fast learner. Welsh will be no problem to him. He can speak a lot of languages already. I'll get him into one not far from you, not Anwin's, for her sake." There was a pause, where the whole of this ludicrous situation hit Gwen's brain all at once. "Who is he, Jack?" "He is something to do with Mallory, isn't he?" Jack paused. He never paused. "No," Jack said eventually. "He is everything to do with Mallory. And if he comes anywhere near his twin brother, David." "David," Jack confirmed. "There will be a catastrophe so great it will pull the world apart." Gwen turned in the phone box, reaching into her pocket as the display flashed telling her the call would end in 30 seconds unless she added another coin. She had another £1. It was important she get as much information out of Jack as possible. "I need to meet you," Gwen told him. "I need you to be honest with me. I'll keep Roddy safe, no doubt about that, but you've got to trust me, Jack." She heard Jack sigh. "Yes," he said eventually, after another great pause. "It would be good to relieve my mind of the truth." "Say, Ianto's shrine?" Gwen pressed, as the sight of a police car out on an early morning raid caught her eye. "I would say that is most appropriate." 88,888,888 19th of October 2006, Torchwood 3 Sit. Owen, who had planned to creep across the floor of the hub in the middle of the night, sort out his bag, and force his mind onto the Sontaran dissection that wasn't quite finished. And if that didn't work, think about where it was that Mallory had got the Ossarian brain tissue from. He had never even seen an Ossarian before, who were supposed to be octopus-like with the parasitical ability to bond a victim's DNA to its own and take over its body. They communicated telepathically, so whole swarms of them could descend upon a population like a plague. And he was not alone. Jack Harkness was waiting for Owen, slinking back to his workplace in the middle of the night. He was guilty of nothing apart from a desire to be back at Torchwood 4. "Where have you been?" Owen turned slowly, arrogantly, screwing up his eyes. "T4, he told Jack. "That was 2 days ago," Jack cautioned him, pacing towards him, treading down the gantry steps, giving Owen time to leg it. He didn't. Instead, Dr. Owen Harper stared him down. "I got back. I got some kip. I came in." "Sorry," Jack told him. "Won't Washington?" "You went up the 2 days ago." "Where've you been?" "I took my time getting back," Owen told him. "I stayed a bit longer than I might have," he admitted. "But, you knew Mallory had been going into the rift and you didn't tell me." "Don't you think I should have known that, given the nature of her headaches?" "No, Owen." Jack shook his head. "The headaches have been a recent thing. Mallory has been able to go into the rift all her life." "How do you think we come by such cool stuff?" "She's a collector of flowers," Owen mumbled. "Archie," Jack replied, rolling his eyes. "Don't get in the way of that, Owen. They need one another. Torchwood needs them both." "You do, you mean?" Owen did not mean to argue with Jack, but he was aggrieved. Quite a lot of information had been concealed from him. "We may all do, in the end." Jack took some steps towards Owen. "Just, remember she's your patient." He looked towards the Sontaran. "And I want him finished by the end of the day." 88,888,888 19th of October 2006 Archie, they are beautiful. Mallory, hearing the click of the door opening, turned to find out whether it was Jack, Archie or Owen. The flowers entered the living room first, violets and dog roses, so of course she knew who it was, especially that she liked wild flowers. "Can you put them in the kitchen sink while I find a vase?" In a mini dress and a pair of combat trousers, Mallory made her way out, the flowers, with Archie following. When he lowered them, Mallory leaned across to him and gave him a kiss on the cheek. "Oh, girl, it's like you're reading my mind." The Glaswegian tones came from behind the flowers, and Archie McLeish lowered them, and kissed her on the forehead. "Is that doctor from Torchwood 3 around?" Mallory shook her head. "Went yesterday. Wanted to make sure my treatment was coming on." "He slept in the settee." Mallory waited until Archie nodded before smiling. She had done right. "And he's treating you for?" Archie prompted. "Headaches," Mallory told him. "You know." She raised her hand to the side of her head. "And I told you, You won't have to work when we are married. They won't pursue you then. That's what I am afraid of, Mallory admitted, turning when the kettle whistled, pouring the boiling water onto the tea leaves into the chromium teapot. Arrowroot biscuits on the plate and then onto the tray. Archie McLeish stood aside while she carried through the tray. An hour later, tea enjoyed, and the head of Torchwood 2 was standing at the door of Torchwood 4. Mallory was pulling on a jacket and had a box with her. "Ready to go?" he asked, smiling. Mallory returned the smile. Ready. And she was. Mallory had the latest coordinates hacked from Torchwood 1's still operational mainframe. Time to avert yet another disaster.